Of the National Task Force-West Philippine Sea, under my direction as the Commandant of the Philippine Coast Guard, I deployed three Philippine Coast Guard vessels to assist in the rotation and resupply operations of the Armed Forces of the Philippines to BRP Sierra Madre in Ayungin Shoal. These vessels include two 44-meter multi-role response vessels, namely BRP Sindangan and BRP Cabra, as well as the big ship that we have, the 97-meter MRRV, BRP Mensora Aquino. These Philippine Coast Guard vessels facilitated the safe and secure delivery of provisions to our brave service personnel stationed in Ayungin Shoal, and that was yesterday. The Philippine Coast Guard vigilantly escorted the supply boats utilized by the Armed Forces of the Philippines to transport essential provisions and supplies to our troops aboard BRP Sierra Madre. They were successful in completing the mission yesterday, despite attempts by five China Coast Guard vessels and 28 Chinese maritime militia boats to recklessly harass, block, execute dangerous maneuvers in another attempt to illegally impede or obstruct a routine resupply and rotation mission to BRP Sierra Madre. Further, the Philippine Coast Guard and the Armed Forces of the Philippines closely monitor the presence of four People Liberations Army Navy vessels, including a hospital ship, a corvette-type vessel, and a missile boat within the immediate vicinity of Ayungin Shoal. Together with the National Task Force-West Philippine Sea, the Philippine Coast Guard condemns once again the China Coast Guard's unprovoked act of coercion and dangerous maneuvers against a legitimate, lawful, and routine Philippine rotation and resupply mission to Ayungin Shoal. It has put the lives of our personnel at risk. The systematic and consistent behavior of the China Coast Guard vessels do not align with the universally accepted behavior of Coast Guards. Ironically, they are supposed to ensure safety of life at sea, but they have deliberately violated the Convention on the International Regulations for Preventing Collisions at Sea, or COLREX, of 1972, to which the People's Republic of China is also a signatory state. The dangerous maneuvering, such as shown by the Chinese Coast Guard vessels, are illegal, reckless, and irresponsible actions that puts into question and significant doubt their narrative of law enforcement and their identity as Coast Guard organization. The Philippine Coast Guard, on the other hand, has acted responsibly, consistent with operational rules based on international law and other IMO conventions that aligns with the peaceful and rules-based norm among Coast Guard organizations in the region. Our Philippine Coast Guard keepers made sure that despite the reckless actions of their Chinese Coast Guard counterpart, they were able to avoid collision between them. And despite their provocative actions to deliberately prevent our vessels from completing the mission, the Philippine Coast Guard keepers maintained their professional behavior and, and firm resolve to avoid escalatory actions. As the Commandant, I am proud to note that the collaborative efforts and unity of purpose between the Armed Forces of the Philippines and the Philippine Coast Guard demonstrate our government's collective determination to assert our sovereignty, sovereign rights, and jurisdiction in the West Philippine Sea. The Philippine Coast Guard is proud to have supported and will always be ready to support the Armed Forces of the Philippines in its effort to sustain our presence in Ayungin Shoal. The Filipino people is rest assured that the Philippine Coast Guard will remain unflinching in performing these roles in the missions of the Philippines to support its outposts in various features in the West Philippine Sea on a regular basis in cooperation and in collaboration with the armed forces of the Philippines as members of the National Task Force-West Philippine Sea. These missions are part of the Philippine government's consistent this is part of the Philippine government's legitimate exercise of its rights and obligations and administrative functions consistent with international law, including the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, the 2016 Arbitral Award, and the Philippine domestic laws. In closing, let me reiterate that the Philippine Coast Guard will not be deterred from implementing the President's explicit guidance for the Philippines to exercise our legal rights and over our maritime zones, including Ayungin Shoal, which form part of our exclusive economic zone and continental shelf. End of my statement.
The Commandant will just be entertaining three questions
Just one question, sir.
from NH cases.
Yeah, from NHK Serenita Monte. Sir, we've been earlier supporting the Royal Mission ever since. Can we say that this time China is like further escalating or increasing its activities there to prevent the Philippine side from going to the Ayungin Shoal? What's your assessment?
I think there has not been significant change so far, but that is always a possibility that we have to prepare.
Jimmy, first of all,
Good afternoon. My question is on Lanzora. It's a compound question. Why did we send Lanzora? Will this be the standard now? And can this be seen as increasing the tension in the West Philippines? So why in the future are we going to ito na ba yung standard natin? And baka sabihin sir ng China kasi, oh, by bringing a bigger ship, tayo yung medyo...
Well, the 97-meter vessel has always been there. It is assigned there. So her deployment really depends on the magnitude of operational need that we have in the area. So in that instance, it was part of her routine movement in the area. But we are not discounting the possibility that she will also be other other missions. But it can't be a standard kasi yung deployment ng barko will really depend. Various factors.
Yung sa comment ng sir, baka we can anticipate that China might say, by sending a bigger ship, we're trying to de-escalate the situation.
This is not the first time that we sent 97-meter ship in the area. Doon talaga assigned it. It is routine, but as what we have said, the support to the RORE mission of the AFP is a routine activity for us. It's not something unusual. We are operating within our waters, and so supporting our own armed forces should be an ordinary thing.
from Kevin.
During the mission, consider as people, I cannot participate. I believe that U.S. American aircraft was different coordinated action to promote it.
I think that's an operational thing that is better left for the armed forces to respond.
Sir Jim,
Bonus.
Associated Press. Last question.
Sir, this multi-cannoning, shadowing, training, blasting, and then a collision researching, this will happen regularly with a regular resupply mission. What are your worst fears, scenarios that you're seeing? Are contingency plans in place if those things? Kasi you have to plan, no, for worst scenario.
The the contingency planning is always there. It's part of the routine actions we do during planning. But I am more concerned about making or having this one as a new norm. It doesn't really uh, appear good to see a fellow Coast Guard violating the rules they are supposed to protect. You know, Coast Guards are established to provide or to protect or to promote safety of life at sea, not to conduct activities that will endanger the lives of people at sea. So I really find it very ironic. I am sad actually to see a fellow Coast Guard organization doing the opposite thing. Thank you very much.
Um, Thank you very much. After this, the commandant still has another meeting to attend to. So,
I want to answer her question.
Yes,
Bonus.
from Washington Post, sir.
Thank you.
You pick
But you'll be the last one, ma'am. Sorry.
bonus question.
Bonus number two.
Washington Post, sir.
Thank you, sir. Maybe a couple of things. No? First, would you consider what happened po yesterday, swarming and the blockade? Um, since you said that you're disappointed on the actions of the Chinese Coast Guard, is what they did something that you would consider swarming or a blockade? Yung sa nakita po kasi namin sa ship, we were surrounded by all these.
It has always been like that.
Yes, sir. But uh, in terms of what we would call it, no, is it blockade? And but also, sir, another follow-up question. No? Nabanggit po kasi ng isang expert na the Coast Guard ship that used the water cannon actually is dark. So it wasn't detected on AIS, but China apparently has used this method before. If you can comment on what that means and your reaction to China deploying the Chinese Coast Guard deploying ships that are not detectable and then using water cannons on our Philippine ships.
That is something that we are seriously looking at. Okay. I think we have to deal with it more privately in the organization, and we will move from there. We have to still get further information. Sorry about that. That's very operational. Thank you.
Just to press on the water cannon incident.
Pardon me, sir, from
Sorry, pardon me, Dr. Sir. Very nice to meet you. Just to press a little bit more on the water cannon incident. This is the second time since office, and you said that you're afraid that these things are becoming norm. And you also said that you're concerned that these are these things are escalating at sea.
I didn't
So-
say it was escalate.
Okay.
May
Possible escalate, yeah.
no, I didn't say that.
You mentioned routine. This is the usual operation of the
Right. So, okay, let's go back to the norm. You said you're afraid that these are going to become the norm, including the water cannon.
Okay, so
Does that include the water cannon? I mean, it's the second time since office.
yeah, that includes water cannon. So the behavior that does not reflect well what Coast Guard should do, that concerns. Because I'd want to see Coast Guards maintaining the purity of their ships, meaning they are humanitarian law enforcement services. Harming people is not part of our business.
Thank you very much. I think the commandant has already provided so much time for everybody. Let's give a round of applause to the commandant.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Commandant Ariela,
Represent na tayo.
hindi na lang ako.
Yung projecto natin. Is it? So for those who didn't join the supply operation, you'll be I'll be presenting to you what transpired during the resupply operation, starting on the day that we departed from Buliluyan Port until the time that we have escorted the supply boats, and then we completed the mission, and then hanggang sa makabalik tayo. Ano yung screen? Nasa likod niyo yung screen. Hmm. So, mamaya na tayo mag-follow up ng mga tanong nyo kay Commandant. Ha? Ako simulan natin. So, good afternoon, everyone. As I said, I'll be discussing kung ano yung what transpired during the resupply operation. To start with, the Philippine Coast Guard vessels deployed 3 Philippine Coast Guard vessels, BRP Sindangan, BRP Cabra, BRP Malchora Aquino, and then for the supply boats that the Armed Forces of the Philippines use, we used the Motor Launch Kalayaan and the Unaiza May number 1. The first leg of the mission, we actually departed from Buliluyan Port. The 44-meter vessels came from there. And of course, the 97 meters has to travel all the way from Puerto Princesa. And then, of course, right after their first destination is for them to proceed to Escoda Shoal or Sabina Shoal, because that's the location we called as the staging area, wherein we're going to wait for the 2 supply boats to arrive. And right after their arrival, they're expected to, we are, our responsibility is to act as security escorts for this supply boats as they proceed to Ayungin Shoal with a distance of 40 nautical miles. Around November 10, midnight, the first China Coast Guard vessel that we documented, who was already doing shadowing activity against MRB 4407, is the Chinese Coast Guard vessel 3303. So this is the first time that we were able to document the presence of the Chinese Coast Guard within the vicinity of Escoda Shoal or Sabina Shoal. Around 5:53 in the morning, at vicinity of Ayungin Shoal, we can see that the Chinese Coast Guard 3303 that we first sighted around midnight from Skoda Shoal has shadowed us all the way going to Ayungin Shoal vicinity waters. In this video, we can also see the second China Coast Guard vessels that second Chinese Coast Guard vessel that appeared, China Coast Guard vessel 21551. From the video, you can see that it attempted to separate the Unaiza May 1 and the motor launch Kalayaan from MRB 4407. For those who didn't join the mission, I would like to mention that MRB 4407 has the primary responsibility of escorting Unaiza May 1 and motor launch Kalayaan because MRB 4409, our original plan is for her to proceed ahead of the contingent to preposition herself in the entrance of Ayungin Shoal. Around 6:02, the China Coast Guard 21551 is still insisting to attempt the separation between Unaiza May 1 and motor launch Kalayaan from MRB 4407 at a very close distance. Still the same plan from China Coast Guard 2151 is to separate Unaiza May 1 from MRB 4407. At 6:15 in the morning, at a distance of 11.5 nautical miles from Ayungin Shoal, China Coast Guard 21556 made a dangerous maneuver and totally blocked MRB 4409. Almost at the same time, the China Coast Guard 3303 also conducted dangerous maneuver to block MRB 9702. At 6:25 in the morning, the Chinese maritime militia vessel 00225 attempted to block Unaiza May 1. And then in this particular time, no, sunod-sunod na to, starting 6:27, you can see that the Chinese Coast Guard vessels and Chinese maritime militia vessels are already conducting dangerous maneuvers to make sure that the Coast Guard vessels will be corralled. Starting at 6:27, MRV 9702 was corralled by the Chinese Coast Guard and two Chinese maritime militia vessels. And at 6:30 in the morning, 3 minutes after 9702 was corralled, you can see that MRB 4409 was also surrounded by the Chinese maritime militia and the China Coast Guard vessels. At the same time, MRB 4409 was also corralled by the Chinese vessels. They deployed two Chinese maritime militia vessels and two China Coast Guard vessels. Around 7:07, we can see the China Coast Guard vessel 3303 and Chinese maritime militia vessels are already increasing its speed because for those media and journalists who boarded 9702, you can already tell on your story that MRV 9702 increased its speed to make sure that she can be able to get away from the attempt to corral her and to immediately reach the destination in Ayungin Shoal. At around 7:26, the China Coast Guard 21551 totally blocked MRV 4407. This is actually the reason why MRV 4407 has been separated from motor launch Kalayaan when she was water cannoned by China Coast Guard 520. So for those of you who would like to ask why motor launch Kalayaan is all by herself and where's a Philippine Coast Guard vessel, would like to go back to the previous slide. It's because MRB 4407 was totally blocked by China Coast Guard 21551. That resulted to the separation of motor launch Kalayaan. And then right after she was separated, the China Coast Guard vessel 5203 um, used her water cannon against motor launch Kalayaan. Around 8:18 until 8:25, the first supply boat that arrived inside the Ayungin Shoal is motor launch Kalayaan, and then it was followed 7 minutes after by Unaiza May 1. It is worth noting that since three Coast Guard vessels were able to reach the entrance of Ayungin Shoal, we were able to at least use our cameras to show that the Philippine Navy has also deployed their rubber boats to counter the China Coast Guard aluminum hull boats that they deployed coming from China Coast Guard vessel 5203. So our Philippine Navy personnel using their rubber boats were very effective in ensuring that the motor launch Kalayaan will be able to come near BRP Sierra Madre. So as you can see, the three rubber boats launched by rigid hull inflatable boats launched by the Philippine Navy is leading the way as motor launch Kalayaan is also being protected and escorted by these rubber boats. There are a total of six rigid hull inflatable boats that the Philippine government deployed to ensure the security of motor launch Kalayaan and Unaiza May 1. For each Coast Guard vessel, we deployed one rigid hull inflatable boat. That makes it six for three REEB from the Philippine Coast Guard and then three from LS-57 or the Philippine Navy against the three China Coast Guard vessel REEBs or aluminum boats rather that they use in running after the supply boats that we deployed. These two supply boats around 9:35 already successfully moored alongside LS-57 to unload the supplies and provisions that are needed by our troops on board the BRP Sierra Madre. Around 12:20 in the afternoon, motor launch Kalayaan and Unaiza May 1 already went out Ayungin Shoal and have already completed the unloading of its supplies. It is worth noting that the Philippine Coast Guard vessel 9702, when she departed Ayungin at a very not so distant Panganiban Reef from Ayungin Shoal, she was still shadowed and the dangerous maneuver were still conducted by China Coast Guard vessel 3303 towards MRB 9702. The entire resupply contingent composed of the two 44-meter vessels, the Unaiza May and motor launch Kalayaan, arrived Skoda Shoal around 1700 or 5 p.m. last November 10. As you can see from the photo, we still documented the presence of the Chinese Coast Guard vessel, who also still shadowed us from starting from Ayungin Shoal until we arrived Sabina Shoal. These are the five monitored Chinese Coast Guard vessels who actively participated in blocking operation against the Philippine Coast Guard vessels and supply boats. China Coast Guard Vessel 21551, China Coast Guard Vessel 5203, China Coast Guard Vessel 3033, and the China Coast Guard Vessel 21551 and 21556. With regard to the aluminum hull boats that they deployed, we can see that the China Coast Guard Vessel 5203 has deployed two aluminum hull boats, and one aluminum hull boats were also deployed by 21555 and 21556. For the Chinese maritime militia vessels who actively carried out dangerous maneuver and blocking operation against the Philippine Coast Guard vessel, we have six Chinese maritime militia vessels who never really hesitated to make sure that their blocking operation will be very successful. That is 00210, 00225, 00110, 00301, 00229, and 00112. With regard to the PLA Navy vessel, we were able to monitor these four Chinese maritime militia, PLA Navy vessel rather, PLA Navy 530, PLA Navy 539, and Hubei Pass attack craft. And we also monitored the presence of the PLA Navy hospital ship, PLA Navy 862. Then the total number of the Chinese vessels that we detected during the resupply operation, there were 16 Chinese maritime militia vessels that were physically monitored, and there were 12 Chinese maritime militia vessels that were detected through their AIS, and 5 China Coast Guard vessels, and 5 People's Liberation Army Navy. In total, we can say that there are a total of 38 Chinese vessels who were present within the vicinity of Ayungin Shoal during this particular resupply operation. For the PRC's actions against the Philippine Coast Guard vessels, these are the radio challenges that BRP Sindangan, BRP Cabla, and BRP Melchora Aquino did to challenge the presence of the China Coast Guard vessels and Chinese maritime militia vessels. And then at the same time, we also listed the number of times that they were challenged by the China Coast Guard vessels. These were also the Chinese maritime militia vessels who participated in blocking the Philippine Coast Guard vessels, as shown in the slide. For the dangerous maneuvers, these are, we have listed 6 dangerous maneuvers that were conducted by the Chinese Coast Guard vessels against the Philippine Coast Guard vessel. That ends our briefing, and I'm free to, I would be willing to respond to your questions and clarifications if you have any.
Sir. Question.
Yes, sir.
Sir Cecil Morelia of
Yes, sir,
BRP, sir. So they deployed 38 vessels for this mission. What if they can double that? They can even triple that. Will we still be able to deliver supplies to the garrison if they doubled or tripled the number of ships that will be trying to intercept them?
Well, as long as, even if they're going to double, they're going to triple the number of Chinese vessels that they're going to deploy. One thing is certain, the Philippine Coast Guard, as what the Commandant has mentioned before our briefing, will not be deterred in carrying out the resupply operation. The Philippine Coast Guard will still, you have the commitment of our Coast Guard that we're still going to carry out this dangerous mission despite of our limited number of vessels and despite of the increasing number of the Chinese vessels that they're going to deploy. We have to make sure that the supplies will still reach our troops on board BRP Sierra Madre.
Follow-up, sir, just a quick one. Is there a plan B wherein you will be using maybe American private military companies to supply BRP Sierra Madre instead of our ships if it's no longer possible?
I think that's more of operational details, sir. And as I said, this is supply operation. is purely Armed Forces of the Philippines mission. The Philippine Coast Guard task and mission is only to make sure that we are going to provide security escort. As to whatever medium, I think the Armed Forces of the Philippines and the Department of National Defense are in better position to respond to that question.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, Sir David.
Sir, for the record lang, you said 38. Is it the most number of Chinese marked vessels that have tried to intercept our our nations throughout the past several months and centuries?
Well, David, let us first clarify your question. Based on the presentation that I gave, there were only 6 Chinese maritime militia vessels who actively participated in the blocking operation, and then there were 5 China Coast Guard vessels. So all in all, there were 11 who actively participated in carrying out dangerous maneuver to the Philippine Coast Guard vessels and also to the supply boats. But if you're asking as to the number of these Chinese vessels who are present within the vicinity of Ayungin Shoal, I think it's fair to say that this is the highest number because there are 38, as I said, that we have documented. But all 38 of this didn't actively participate in the blocking operation. There were only 11, 6 Chinese maritime militia vessels and 5 China Coast Guard vessels.
How do you perceive the others? What were their roles in being there?
I don't want to speculate. Our focus here is to make sure that the resupply operation will still be conducted and to make sure that we're going to successfully accomplish the mission.
The mere presence of the other non-active vessels, sir, did that in any way affect our mission?
As I said, in this particular supply operation, this is the closest ever that the Philippine Coast Guard reached in doing our escort mission for the resupply. The closest is zero point 0.9 nautical miles from BRP Sierra Madre. So to argue that with this large number of the Chinese vessels affected that the resupply operation, it's hard to correlate because we came there as close as 0.9.
Before we proceed, we just need a briefing topic for
One question, one follow-up. Bianca. Correction, 0.09 in Ayungin Shoal, not in Sierra Madre as point of reference. Well, it's true that this is the first time that the Philippine Coast Guard launched our reefs. I have 3 answers for that. One, it's because this is only the first time that we're able to come that close for us to have the ability to deploy our reef. Second, since we have that kind of that opportunity to deploy our reefs, we took this chance, no, to bring our media friends to be able to witness how the Chinese Coast Guard aluminum boats are still being deployed as they attempt to harass and prevent their supply boats from going alongside BRP Sierra Madre. And then the third reason is, of course, we believe that we don't want to we don't want the Chinese government to still continuously argue that they have the total control of Ayungin Shoal. With our capability to maintain our presence there with with the reefs that we deployed and the reefs also of the Armed Forces of the Philippines that they deployed, it showed that we still have the control of Ayungin Shoal.
That particular incident where the TV vessels that were contacted against
As far as the Coast Guard is concerned, we monitored that the water cannon was aimed at motor launch Kalayaan. As to the damage, if ever there is, it's for the Armed Forces of the Philippines to respond. Yes, but despite of the water cannon incident, the motor launch Kalayaan still managed to proceed to BRP Sierra Madre and to unload her supplies. Jeff. Pure News.
Navy, Chinese Navy appeared this time, but do you have the impression that China is showing their presence of its Navy towards our decision?
Well, this is not just the first time that we were able to see a PLA Navy vessel within the vicinity of Ayungin Shoal. But as far as their intervention on the ongoing resupply, the PLA Navy never did take part of any intervention. We can only monitor from afar their presence, but as I said, they never intervened with our resupply operation.
Just on tonight's amazing. That, and then are we going to see her now?
I still don't know. The UNISM, the chartered boats that the Armed Forces of the Philippines is using as supply boats, I think that question is for the AF.
With the follow-up on David's question, with the large number of vessels, can you think this was an escalation on China's part?
On our part, na may malaki tayo o sila? Well, the Chinese Coast Guard has been deploying a lot of larger vessels than what we are seeing now. As I said, for the past 3 or 4 resupply operations, they only started deploying smaller vessels, particularly the 21.5 series. So to argue that they are increasing the tension by deploying more larger vessels, I think it's not uh, good to assume in that way, because in that manner, because the vessels now are getting smaller. In one of my interviews with the last resupply operation, I noted that they have 2 reasons why they are now employing smaller vessels. First one is because they are always, defeated when it comes to optics. Whenever they deploy their bigger vessels and they carry out dangerous maneuver. Second is in terms of maneuverability. We know for a fact that these smaller vessels, the 21.5 series, are more maneuverable in preventing the resupply contingent from reaching Ayungin Shoal. Yes.
In terms of implementation from Taiwan, I would like to ask, because you mentioned that it's the first time that the PCG vessel being so close to Ayungin Shoal. So I would like to ask, what's the reason? How did it get that close? And do you think the PCG has been more skilled in its planning to get closer to Ayungin Shoal?
I think the Philippine Coast Guard skippers were really that skilled whenever we deploy and choose our commanding officers who is going to man our Coast Guard vessels to lead the resupply mission. I think they are just more skilled in a way that the past experience taught them how to outmaneuver the Chinese Coast Guard and even the Chinese Maritime Militia that allowed them to come this close to Ayungin Shoal. Yes.
US military aircraft, I understand that it's an operational matter, but I'd just like to ask your opinion or your assessment. For instance, our US Navy aircraft there support the Philippine interest in the South China Sea, and how often does it appear?
In terms of the armed forces, in terms of the U.S. military aircraft that you cited, of course, I don't have to deny that those embedded media have a photo or even video of the presence to attest the presence of that aircraft. But as to the intent, the objective, the coordination, I think that's for the armed forces of the Philippines to respond.
And I just want to have more clarity on the deployment of BRP Melchor. What necessitated the deployment of a larger vessel? And is it the first time, or is it the first time since when's the last deployment?
Well, to amplify the response of the commandant a while ago, what he was saying is that, for example, of course, this is not a made-up story. People who was on board 9702, you know for a fact that you were transferred to 44 meters, right? it's because it has other resupply operations to complete. So what the commandant was mentioning a while ago is that the deployment of a large vessel such as the 97 meter is of course dependent on the operational needs. Since our media friends could attest that they even have to be transferred to the 44-meter vessel because it has to continuously carry out patrol and do the resupply and other maritime features. It showed that the commandant response this morning is that it depends on the operational requirement that our troops in the West Philippine Sea would require.
Follow up.
This is not the first time. No. Di ko na nabilang.
Sir, reminder lang isang question at isang follow-up lang tayo kasi ang dami. Baka abutan tayo ng gabi. So pagka bigyan na natin sa iba yung question.
What makes it different now? In this mission yesterday, in the previous mission, why did you use a bigger?
Well, as Joseph, ang 24 oras pa ito, tatakilogin ko. Kasi kanina English na eh.
Yeah, foreign friends.
Okay. Ulitin ko lang ulit. As what the commandant has mentioned a while ago, this is dependent on the operational requirement on our troops who are also deployed in other maritime features in the West Philippine Sea. Our embedded media friends would attest, particularly those who boarded 9702, that they even have to transfer to the 44-meter vessel because 9702 hasn't really completed yet her mission. She even has to go to other maritime features to carry out other missions.
So, in other words, this is not in response to the commission.
Well, of course not. As what the commandant has mentioned, it is dependent on the operational requirement that we need to fulfill in carrying out our mandate. Sir Chief.
This, as you said, the commandant, this have become routine, very dangerous maneuver in the UP. So from the Philippine perspective, can you give us a sense of your level of alarm and fear that this could lead to a larger conflict that can possibly involve China and the United States?
Well, Sir Jim, I don't want to be speculative and to make some presumption as to what really would happen and whatever much more dangerous expectation that we are going to have in anticipation.
You're a very studied this issue very well.
Sir Jim, as I said, on the part of the Philippine Coast Guard, we're just going to abide and adhere to the international law, regardless as to how provocative the Chinese Coast Guard will be performing, regardless how dangerous maneuver that they're going to throw at us, whether they use water cannon, whether they use military-grade laser. We are not going to allow them to make the Philippine Coast Guard personnel on board our vessels to escalate the tension. We are going to make sure that our deployment there will not be the main reason for us to have a much more higher tension in the region.
In your face, direct assault on Philippine sovereignty and Philippine national security. So, what lies ahead now? How ready are you to deal with this worsens? And what is your call to the international community to push China to align with international law? Correct.
If you listed some points that the commandant mentioned in his statement, he highlighted the fact that as a Coast Guard organization, you have to be adhere to the existing IMO conventions, particularly, for example, the full legs. And as a Coast Guard agency, you're supposed to be the one to lead in maritime safety. Now, if you're asking me what is our call for the international community, I think just to focus first in the region, among Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, we choose to deploy our white ships because we never really wanted to provoke anybody neither we also don't want to escalate the tension. So if there's one thing that we would ask China, the People's Republic of China, to do in this in response to whatever activities we have, that is for them to respect international law and adhere to the IMO conventions that would not endanger the lives of our of the Filipino fishermen and even our troops. Barnett.
Just to pick up on Jim's line of questioning, the commandant said that he fears that this is becoming a norm. So how do we break,
Correction. Parang hindi niya naman sinabing he fear.
or that this it could become a norm?
Pero he doesn't fear.
Okay, that it could become, it's possible that this is becoming the norm um, in confrontations between China and the Philippines in the West Philippine Sea. So how do we break? Of course, we don't want it to become the norm. So how do we break this norm?
Well, I think, first of all, let me first highlight the fact that the norm that the commandant is mentioning is the China Coast Guard's behavior, not the norm per se that we are also, have to adjust with the norm that they are setting. What he is highlighting there is the Chinese Coast Guard behavior as a norm on their part. If your question is how are we going to respond with the Chinese making this as a norm in the resupply operation, I believe that our effort in the Transparency Initiative has been very successful in rallying support from the international community to condemn the illegal actions of China and to make the Filipino people aware of what's happening. So for us to challenge this kind of norm that the Chinese has been setting in whenever we do the resupply operation, I think embedding our media friends and to make the international community aware of what's happening is our best way to make sure that the status quo will still prevail and it will not be changed or altered by the Chinese.
Last three questions po. Last three in fact. Three questions.
Follow up ba to?
Okay.
Next, Lon.
Still related to breaking the after ng mga water cannon, what should be the official response of the Philippine Coast Guard? Can you discuss the limits of what we can do in water because we are somehow civilians and make sure we can just not first water cannon when this incident happens?
Well, in terms of the rules of the use of force, I think the water cannon that the Chinese has been using against the Philippine Coast Guard vessel or even their supply boats is something that is not applicable for such usage, considering that it's not the use of force in a way that's not an armed attack, or it's not something that is kinetic. So, if your question is what will be the response of the Philippine Coast Guard vessel? Well, for this, for the previous water cannoning incident that they did, we just have to make sure that our personnel in our vessel will not be affected, and we have to make sure that no harm will be done to our personnel. So it's either we're just going to move away from them and to protect our personnel and to make sure that we're not going to be, I would say it, be triggered to escalate the tension.
How do you follow up on balance the incident because the Chinese they're open to being around or being aggressive in the ocean, and while we are on the safe side, we're always trying to get away safely without no aggression. So, just wondering, are we always will be this way, trying to get out of situations that Chinese are being aggressive?
On the part of the Philippine Coast Guard, we really have to make sure that our commanding officers that are being deployed in the West Philippine Sea are professional and would always choose to make sure to carry out actions that would not escalate the tension.
Okay. Sir, last two questions na lang po, no?
Sir, hindi na pa daw, sir.
Sige, nauna nag-ano si Sir Cecil.
Sir, we just noticed that the China Coast Guard was able to set the narrative this time by coming out with a statement almost in real time. So they were able to set the narrative that we are intruding in their waters. But is there a way for us to put out a statement earlier, like the task force statement, instead of at one time or after news?
Well, in response to your question, sir, the question that I would also like to ask you as my media friends, does it really matter if we're going to have a press statement early without actually verifying the facts, right? Would they be able to dominate the narrative if they don't hesitate to tell the world about lies without actually verifying facts? Because on our part, we would really thoroughly and carefully know the information, know the incident, know made up stories, but to gather facts before we make a statement. I think it's more better for us to have a much more thought of statement that is guided by the facts and the truth instead of, you know, having to release a statement that are only made up of lies and no basis for facts.
Okay, thank you. Next. Last.
Si Regina daw, sir.
Si Regina, oh, sige. Washington Post.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, could you walk us through the sequence and the Philippine perspective of the deployment of the inflatable boats, both ours and China's? Did China lower their boat first and then we lowered ours? And then you mentioned earlier that China used their three grids to run after ours. So could you walk us through our perspective of what happened?
Well, first of all, the Chinese Coast Guard vessels. Every time that the uh, supply boats arrived or entered the Ayungin Shoal, it has been a procedural for them to make sure that the aluminum boats are also, launched or deployed. The only difference is that in this time, since our Coast Guard vessels were able to come close to the entrance of Ayungin Shoal, we were able to also deploy ours. But if your question is it the Philippine Coast Guard or the Philippine Navy that prompted the Chinese to launch their reefs as well? I think it's the other way around. They have been launching their reefs or their aluminum boats even before we, thought of launching ours as well.
Do you think that they were surprised when they saw how close we were able to get to Ayungin Shoal?
Gusto ko sana sagutin yung tanong mo na katulad na kay Sub Middle eh. I'm not sure. I'm not really sure whether it surprised them of the Coast Guard, reaching that close to the entrance. But definitely, they have. Kung tayo nga, we noted that this is the closest ever that we reach. I think the Chinese are also analyzing what really transpired. How come that they were not able to block the three Philippine Coast Guard vessels from getting close to Ayungin Shoal? Yes, sir.
With your big framework of the South China Sea and the number of incidents, you can say that the Ayungin Shoal, maybe followed by the Scarborough Shoal, are now the greatest, most dangerous flashpoint in the South China Sea. At least at this point in time, by the number of incidents.
If you're only referring, Sir Jim, with what is happening in the West Philippine Sea in the Philippine occupied maritime features, but of course we're not also aware with what is happening in Luconia shoals of Malaysia. We're not also aware of what's happening in Paracel in Vietnam. We're not also aware with what is happening in Luis Reef in Brunei, or even the issue of the Natuna Islands with Indonesia. So it's not. I think it's not correct to say that Ayungin and Baho de Masinloc are the flashpoints, because not until Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, or even Brunei publicize their incidents that are also happening within their own waters, then we can probably have our own data to compare how many incursions that had happened in those areas.
It's one of the most alarming flashpoints, no, in the region.
It is the only reason why the international community is aware of what is happening. It's because of you guys. We allowed the Filipino media to tell this to the world what is happening. But I don't think that it's only the Philippines who is experiencing this. I think Malaysia and other Southeast Asian claimant states in the South China Sea are also experiencing the same.
You have to recognize that fact. It's a major, one of the most alarming flashpoints before you.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Sorry. The statement that you made a very important point that this now has become a systematic and consistent blocking effort.
Pero ang point ko nga, we still don't know. I mean, not until Vietnamese, Indonesian, Malaysian would also tell their story.
No, sorry, that's the NSC statement said that this has now become a systematic.
Well, I think what the statement is only mentioning is that among the maritime features within the West Philippine Sea, but it's not actually internationalizing the issue in comparison with other claimant states.
That's separate to that. The statement is saying that, and you also mentioned this actually earlier, that the blocking efforts have become systematic by the Chinese, become consistent throughout these past several months. Can you just expound on that? Why it's systematic?
Well, if your question is about my statement about how systematic they are in synchronizing 30 in the morning, we can already see the movement of the Chinese maritime militia and the Chinese Coast Guard vessels all at the same time, blocking each Coast Guard vessel, 9702, and then 4407, and then 4409. So that's the first one I'm trying to explain, that systematic. Second is, nowadays, it has been very systematic that even the distribution of the Chinese vessels, like one China Coast Guard vessel for two Chinese maritime militia vessels, for them to successfully corral a particular Coast Guard vessel. So that's the system that I'm trying to imply during my presentation.
Okay, sir. Thank you, media friends. In as much as we want to extend our press con, may gagamit po ng venue natin.